Namaste everyone, and welcome to this episode of Musings of a Modern Mystic. I'm Yasmin, and if you've heard the introduction, you'll know some of the context for this upstart. This is the first episode I'm recording for this new podcast venture, this journey, and we'll see where it leads. So I welcome you to just settle in. Wherever you are in your day, I invite you to just share a breath with me. We'll take a moment to just be together, and then we will see what musings and reflections we have for today, which are going to be on the theme of social media and technology. So, if you'd like to join me for a breath. Taking that chance to pause is such a gift to me these days. Having lived a life that was so fast and instantaneous, and I think a lot of my technology use had informed that without me even realising. So this episode is actually inspired by recent conversations with a few people about how we're noticing how technology has changed the way that we communicate, the way that we or certainly the reflections have helped me to see in myself. I can't speak so much for others, but the conversations have been around the ways communication may have changed since using social media, instant messaging, and the ability to do things myself independently without relying on a phone. So the phone has become a tool and reliance for remembering things, for setting alarms, for wake-up alarms, for emails and connections to other people. It's become a go-to for finding out anything, pretty much, which is really interesting. It's neither good nor bad, but we'll see where the reflections take us. So I kind of first realised how much technology had been a part of my life and how that had been impacting my life when I arrived in New Zealand after having burned out from work and quit 3 jobs. I was solo travelling. Well, at the time when I first started out, I'd met someone on a camp in America, and they too wanted to do a working holiday visa, so we landed at the same time and we started out together for a few weeks before we went our separate ways and carried on our travels. So on arriving, I was reluctant to use data. I was conscious to conserve my battery, being out and about. But I was just completely struck by the world around me. Like the moment that I flew over them mountains, and there's these vast jagged peaks as far as I can see, and I'm just speechless, in awe, like there's tears pouring down my face. Other people are just watching their screens around me, and I'm struck that they're so absorbed in what they're watching, they're not seeing what I'm seeing, and it's so incredible to me. I want to scream and wake everyone up, shake everyone, go, have you seen this? I mean, maybe some of them are locals, maybe some of them have seen that view countless times, but it just, oh my goodness, humbled by nature is an understatement. I'd never seen mountains like it, and they just seem so vast and far-stretching and impenetrable. I was like, has anyone ever actually ventured there? Like, that seems so inaccessible, like, wow. So I was just, from that moment on, I was struck by everything about New Zealand. It was so different from every experience I'd had before of nature, of travel. I guess the way that I was travelling was different as well. So I was conscious to leave my phone in my bag. I wanted to meet people out there. Back home, they were 12 hours behind, so they weren't going to be up when I was up, and that was a real gift. So putting my phone away helped me to realise how much I had been using my phone on every day for constant stimulation, for constant distraction, entertainment, messaging, it's like every moment of my life would be full. I'd listen to podcast episodes, I'd be messaging people, scrolling through news feeds, reading news stories, whether I was in a queue, commuting, I always had something going on my device because I didn't like the idea of being bored. I didn't like it. If my phone battery was getting low and I had no way of charging it, that'd be frustration because I'm waiting to get that next episode finished or to watch that latest whatever it may be, or to message that friend, to respond to them emails. So without realising it, I'd come to crave being stimulated, and I didn't realise just how much until I wasn't using it, and how disconnecting that could be. So instead of me being with someone and constantly checking my phone, checking messages, when me and my friend were out and about, there wasn't that. Although they used their phone, I was experiencing the world around me in a completely different way. I was noticing the little details, the cracks or not in the pavements. Like the streets were so pristine. The water was clear. I'm in a city. I couldn't believe it. I'm in a city and I'm walking along in the middle of a city centre, and there's this quiet little patch with a little bridge, clear waters where I can see pondweed and fish, and it's down some steps. There's no traffic at this point because this is a pedestrianised bit, but even the traffic in the city is not traffic like I've known cities. And I can hear nature, and there's trees, and I feel like I'm in a completely different world. And instead of wanting to capture it through a phone, to film it, to take photos, I'm actually drinking it in with my senses, with my eyes. Like I want to memorize every aspect of this. I'm just so enamored with it all. I'm fascinated. This is a whole new place, new experience. I'm people watching, I'm noticing the birds and just the small things that back home I barely looked out. I was realising that actually when I had my phone on, my gaze would be down at the floor. I'd be strolling at a march to get from A to B as quickly as I could to get through the day because I was busy and I was doing as much as I could. Whether I was walking to the gym, walking to work, there was always a place I wanted to be 5 minutes ago. And there was always something I wanted to be doing while I was on a commute. I didn't like doing nothing. And so it was so novel to just go and sit in a cafe on my own. Like the first time I went out on my own and I sat in a cafe and I just pulled out my journal, ordered a drink, and I'm noticing the people in the cafe and I'm wondering what their stories might be, you know, what's their background, what's brought them there that day, the staff. I'm noticing the sounds, the smells, the sights out the window. And an older guy walks up to me and says, "You've got the smallest writing." And that proved to be kind of like an opener for so many conversations, because often after that point I enjoyed going to cafes, going to places on my own and just sitting, writing, or just people watching, just sometimes reading a book. But I didn't feel like I needed to have my phone with me to keep me entertained and go out alone. I didn't feel uncomfortable going out alone without having my phone in my hand, which was I was really struck that felt so novel. And the conversations I had with people in the cafes were wonderful. I met so many people that I would have missed out on if I'd have had my phone in my hand. I wouldn't have sparked them conversations. Then people might not have come up to me because they might have seen me with a screen in my hand and decided I was unapproachable. And that was a real delight. And actually there was one point where this older lady, I asked if she was okay. And she turned and she's got tears in her eyes and she went, people don't usually notice me. Like, I think she was thinking out loud. And I'm so moved by this, like, realising that in the past, you know, especially older people, if they're out and about in shops, if they're getting the bus to town or whatever, especially if they live alone, the only forms of conversations, interactions with another person would be when they're out and about. And now with so many people with headphones in, looking at a screen, podcasting, messaging, whatever it happens to be, unless there's someone else there without a device, generally I'm noticing people of the older community, but not always, where's that conversation coming from? Like, she said she felt invisible. Older people feeling invisible, like anyone feeling invisible. How is that a thing? Why is that a thing? And when did that happen? And so that really got me thinking, what had I been tuning out of to tune into my phone? I hadn't realised how much my senses were being dulled in the process. Like, everything that was going on around me wasn't registering. I was barely aware of what was going on around me unless I got to a road and realised I needed to stop and check for traffic. I wouldn't really look up and look out. My gaze would be at my feet. I'm focusing on my pace and I'm fully concentrated on whatever podcast or whatever talk I've got going on or the message that I'm writing. And so I'm missing out on... I don't look up. I don't notice the sky, the clouds, barely notice. I mean, don't get me wrong, if there's sunshine there, I'm going to know about it. I've always been a sun baby. But it's like... Has anyone ever been on a drive, a walk, a commute, and they've got from one place to another and they've got no real conscious recollection of any part of the journey? They can only remember snippets. It's like, oh my goodness, this living on autopilot, this ability to tune out the world. Don't get me wrong, it can have its merits when you need a minute to yourself to tune out the world, but I was wondering at what cost. Because the conversations I had in them cafes were so rich, and the experiences I was having, trying to remember the experiences for myself, not take a photo or a video, but to let my eyes, my senses drink it in, because I was like, I want to be able to visualize. When I get home, I want to be able to relive this if I want to. I want to remember that warmth of the sun, them trees, the way them trees move in the wind. Like, I've never seen a tree like that, especially in the Christchurch gardens, because like any stately gardens and cultivated places where they've got plants and trees from all over the world, some of them were so novel, and I wanted to remember that hue of them red leaves, or the way that bark was like peeling. It was like curled around the bark, your average tree bark, if there is such a thing, until it got to like the lowest branches, and then it was like the bark was like paper thin at this point. It's gone from this hard, thick, rope-like strand going round to tiny papery drapings falling off. Like, it was like a gown, but it looked so elegant. Like, it didn't look untidy like rags. It looked so deliberate. And they're blowing in the wind, and it just reminded me of the willows back home, because I used to love some of the willow trees by the river. And as kids, we went to the park a lot, and we didn't have phones when I was growing up. As a teenager, we were allowed them if we were going out and we needed a lift home at school, clubs, whatever it happened to be. But as a kid, you go out and the world around you is your entertainment. You are your entertainment. Or it was for me. So I'd go to the park and I'd play. I'd take a ball. And the rest of the time I'd just be people watching, cloud watching. Like, I made my own fun. The world around me it captured my full attention. And I hadn't realised I'd lost that. I hadn't realised how much that had been kind of dimmed down. And it made me realise how much it affected my communication, my connection with other people. Like, I didn't realise how much it had seeped into the fabric of every day until, like, I lived in the same house at the time as my parents. And I'm going about my day with headphones in, listening to podcast episodes. I'm up and down. Even when I'm with other people, I'm finding it hard to not be aware of the messages coming into my phone. We had a no phones rule at the table. But sometimes I'm now taking my food up to my room so I can carry on with what I'm doing. I'm shutting myself off. And even now, most of what I do is quite insular. And I don't feel like that's particularly unusual. Like, if I spend time with the people that also live with me once a week properly, that's kind of like something that's planned in and decided almost. Like, it's an event. Because I'm so used to being on my own, independent, and using a device to connect with the people. Which has its merits, but I am starting to rethink a lot of the things that New Zealand first kind of woke me up to. And another thing that kind of came up recently was how the mind can be so fast these days. Like, literally, a thought can pop in my head and I can act on it instantly. I can Google something, I can send a message, send an email. If I need to remember something, I can set an alarm. If I want to research something, I can do it there and then. You know, someone says to me, oh, have you thought about this vitamin or whatever? I can look it up straight away. And I could order it within 5 minutes if I wanted to and have it next day delivery. And so I hadn't realised how much that was interfering or affecting my communication until someone very lovingly said to me, I don't think you realise, but every time I've just made a point, you've instantly brought in your own story. It's triggered a thought in me, and I've spoken that thought. And I was like, I've changed so much in the way I consciously try to communicate. I try to listen to other people. And there's times that maybe if I have been spending more time using technology, which had been the case that week, especially social media, I hadn't realised that potentially that was affecting my ability to filter myself in conversation. It was affecting my ability to listen to other people without wanting to instantly respond, react, do something. Where on Facebook I can read something, I can have read 2 words of a post, 2 lines of a post and like it before having to read the rest of it, or without having to read the rest of it. I can respond to a comment even when I can see someone else's typing. And so the art of conversation, I was like, have I been losing out on some of the basics of conversation because of the phone? So it's really got me thinking. And maybe you want to pause and reflect on how you use technology, how you use devices, phones, smartwatches, whatever it may be. And how much you turn to it for entertainment, just in an everyday when you're out and about, or you're waiting to pick someone up, you're waiting for them to come, or you're on a commute on train or whatever. How much do you notice what's going on around you versus looking at a screen? How often do you communicate with people around you, unless you're in a shop or a cafe there to buy a drink? How often do you communicate with people around you if you're not with anyone else? Or acknowledge them, smile to them, make eye contact? Or how much are you focused on a device? And this is no judgment. It's just a neutral observation. It's just becoming aware of how you go about your day. It certainly got me thinking I'd like to do some things differently. and I certainly want to acknowledge people. I do make a conscious effort when I remember to leave my phone in my bag when I'm, for example, going through the checkout or whatever, so that I'm actually acknowledging the person that's doing something for me. I hate being on the phone. If someone's called me and I'm at the checkout, I hate it because it feels so rude to be like, hey, I'm with you, but I'm going to talk completely over everything you're saying because I'm talking to someone down the phone. I really don't like it. But I'd feel less reluctant potentially to be messaging. So it's a real interesting one for me. I had no real, before going to New Zealand, I had no real boundaries around my social media use or messaging. I'm much more boundaried now. I was very conscious of that coming home, in terms of not using messaging beyond a certain time, trying not to use screens at least an hour before bed. A lot was different when I came back from New Zealand, but that was certainly one that I was like, it's been such a gift to not feel the need to respond instantaneously 24/7, and to be readily available. So I made it clear to people, look, if you message me beyond this time or before this time, it's unlikely you're going to get a reply. If I've got stuff to do that day, if I'm working, if I'm whatever, you might not receive a reply until the end of the day or the next day, depending on how that day's been. Because it was such a gift to feel free of that sense of pressure and obligation to reply and respond to everyone. Because 10, 12, 50, any number of people can contact you at any time to drop a message. And where in the past, you'd see people as you saw them. You'd communicate as you communicated. They might send a letter, but it's unlikely you're going to have got 15 letters in a day to respond to. And I know messages can be really short and brief, but just seeing them notifications used to make me feel a sense of pressure, and I'd feel guilty if I didn't reply straight away. I'd feel guilty, especially if they could see that I'd read it, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to think about that response, or if they've asked me if I'm free on these dates or whatever to get back to them. I was like, I hope they don't think I'm being rude by delaying my response. So I was so conscious of that. So when I came home, I was like, look, it's been really nice to not be contactable 24/7, and actually this is my, this is when I am willing and engaging with social media, and this is when I won't be. So if you send a message here, it's highly unlikely you're going to get a reply, just so you're aware. And that has actually felt really freeing, and more often than not people have understood. But if they don't understand as well, that's fine, that's their journey too. I'm learning not to be so concerned about other people, and actually what's serving me right now. What is, because it's been important to me to set them boundaries for myself, but also so that other people know what to expect. And so that I can feel more conscious around how I'm engaging with technology. I don't scroll through news feeds much anymore or anything, unless there's a specific person that I'm aware has got stuff going on. I might check out their page to send them a message, but other than that, I don't really do news feeds. Sometimes I check in with group pages, but I can take on notifications or leave them. I don't feel the pressure to actually open them all, address them all, read them all. And so that has in itself kind of lifted a weight of obligation I hadn't known was there. Like when I realised all the things I'd been expecting of myself in a day, technology had really been adding to that massively, because the number of emails, messages, you name it, that can have come through in a day it could stack up. And it got me thinking about like how my use of technology had changed from when I was a kid, because during childhood there wasn't a phone available 24/7. There was a dial-up connection to internet, and if your mum was on the phone especially if it was an abroad call, If there was a long call or anything, it's a no-go. It was either phone or internet. And even then we had hourly slots growing up. And I'm actually really grateful for the boundaries we did have as kids. And there was part of me that regretted how much I'd allowed them kind of boundaries to slip, how much I hadn't been as disciplined with my tech use since I'd grown up and was responsible for it for myself. Still using devices during meals, whatever it happened to be. When as kids it was no screens at the table, talk to the people, it was very different. And so realising that, I was wanting to start bringing things back in for myself, because I was like, if I don't do it, it's not going to happen. And just realising how much it become my go-to. If I want to know anything, synonyms, countries, you're playing a game, Trivial Pursuit, whatever it happens to be, it's just so easy to whip your phone out. And how impatient I feel if I can't think of an answer within a minute. I want to check it out. Like, am I actually as patient as I was before I started using technology that enabled me to communicate and do things straight away, to fulfill things that's popped into my head straight away, or order things? I don't know if I've got the same level of patience, or the same capacities even, using a phone to navigate with maps and stuff. How proficient would I be without a phone navigating places, like to look at landmarks and to be aware of general direction and, things that it's easier to not have to think about because your device can do it for you. But do I want to be so reliant on a device? Because I can remember the visceral sense of panic I used to feel if I realised I'd left the house without it. It'd be panic and frustration, like what if something happened, because I wanted to have my phone with me all the time in case something happened, in case I need to communicate with people, especially at night. And sometimes I'd call people when I was walking just to feel a little safer, or have it close to, I'd always have my hand on my phone so that if anything happened straight away I can call for help. And so I was constantly on tender hooks with it and without it. I felt like I needed it for safety, and yet at the same time it's just a plastic and glass block essentially. And that's my sense of safety and comfort and connection to the world. It's incredible. So it's made me aware. These reflections have made me aware to even rethink, even now, how I use technology, like how I eat, consciously eating without a phone or a device, so that I'm actually taking in the flavours, the texture, the temperature, the gift of the food, especially when I'm on my own, and just the ability to communicate, to connect with the world, to notice the world, especially when there's nature around. Like I couldn't believe, looking back, that I'd walk through the country park on commutes and stuff, and I'd have headphones in and I'd miss most of it. I really value my nature time now, and the devices are often in pocket most of the time when I'm out and about, especially, on my bike always. But sometimes when I'm walking, I do still like listening to an audiobook or something, but I'm still noticing the trees and the plants and the river and the much more so, and the clouds and the sky. I do quite enjoy cloud watching rather than looking down at my feet. My posture's improved a bit, I'd say, actually, since using less of a device. Maybe my neck's not so it's like my head used to always be down and heavy, and maybe just using it a bit less has changed things as well. Because I do like looking up at the clouds, at the sky, at people around me, people watching, and even on commutes in cars. As kids, we used to play these games where you're trying to cheer up the grumpiest person, or you're trying to get everyone to wave back, or especially when sat in traffic jams and things. Like, there was any number of games we'd play. And I'm starting to do that more, not the waving in the game so much, But I'm starting to notice the people commuting around me, wonder at their stories, notice at the clouds, or just to look out the window and enjoy it. I used to really enjoy that. Just switch off as a kid and just watch the world go by outside the window and not feel the need to be doing or listening. Or I used to actually quite enjoy car journeys, and that was probably because it was the exact time I couldn't do everything. So yeah. So that's today's reflections on technology. Maybe that brings stuff up for you. You're welcome to message under the video. Let us know how it landed. How did this land for you? Did it raise any thoughts, any reflections? Did you have a rethink on any areas of your tech use, or maybe not? And tech, none of this is either good nor bad. Like, technology is such a gift in my life too, and it connects me with people all over the world, from people that I met during travel and such beautiful people since. I really welcome the opportunities that technology affords me for work, for writing, for all sorts of stuff, for the ability to do this podcast. At the same time, I'm aware of the value of balancing the way that I use it, and to be more conscious about how I use it rather than being used by it, which I used to be. I used to be quite asleep to the way that I was actually using it, the way that I was quite addicted to it without realising, whether it was scrolling through feeds or feeling that need and that pressure to like things, subscribe, to stay tuned in, to keep up with peers during high school. It's nice to not feel so pressurised on that front anymore. So, wishing you all the best until the next episode. It's been a pleasure. Take care, and I will see you next time for whatever reflections are inspired for the next podcast episodes. You've been joining me, Amy Yasmin, on Musings of a Modern Mystic. Take care, and namaste.